everyone. I'm Elisa Gums, the Executive Managing Editor of Black Enterprise. And we're here today with someone that you know as a former basketball player and now as a television sports analyst. But he has, behind the scenes, been super successful as a businessman, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So please allow me to introduce entrepreneur and ESPN personality, Jay Williams.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here. I'm actually outside. It feels refreshing to be outside a little bit, I guess.
I know, it's nice to get out sometimes, right? Especially these days.
Exactly. Tell me about it.
Well, I'm so glad you were able to sit down with us today. I first knew you as a star basketball player at Duke University, which it pains me as a Tar Heel to say, but you won a national championship with.
You guys got a lot of national championships too. It's okay.
We do. It is. It's okay. We'll put aside the best rivalry in college sports for like the next 30 minutes.
Yes.
And in 2002, you were drafted second overall by the Chicago Bulls, but just a year later, you were in a motorcycle accident that ended your career and almost ended your life. And you've been really candid talking about that time after the accident and what it was like from, a physical rehab and a depression and addiction standpoint. But I want to ask you about the transition to a career after basketball. And once you got your life sort of, together, how it was that you figured out what you wanted to do with the rest of your life.
So there's a topic that's currently happening right now within the NFL that I think is very poignant for this conversation. Currently what's happening is you have legislation that is being, voted on tomorrow or the next day in which teams are being incentivized to hire African-American coaches or general managers. Right now in the NFL, there's currently only 2 African-American general managers and 4 head coaches that are minorities. And, this news came out over the weekend, and the amount of anger and frustration I saw on social media was kind of like mind-boggling to me. And it reminded me of the same kind of pent-up frustration I had after my accident, to be frank with you. It was one of those things where I was really angry at myself. I was mad at the circumstances. And my mindset now goes to a place where I say, okay, I get by face value, people are frustrated because is it demeaning? Is it belittling? Is it debasing? Yes, it is all these things, and people should be hired based upon their own merit. But at the same time, I'm not going to let emotion deter me away from stepping my foot in that door and actually getting my body through that door and then showing you that I not only belong here, but I can excel once I get here. And that's the kind of educational wealth that I think is important for us as minorities to pass down, because we allow our anger to take us into places. And I understand what my great-great-grandfather went through with slavery, but I know that each generation has sacrificed and worked their tail off so that today I can be aware to take advantage of those opportunities. And I think as it relates to my own story, is I spent a lot of time being angry at myself and being frustrated. And frankly, it wasn't until I started to think about what my accident had gained for me from that experience, instead of what it had taken away from me, that ultimately I started to empower myself. And I think that allowed me to start being more confident in who I was becoming, because there was no more identity crash with who I was with what I did, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, you did get your degree, and in 3 years, I might add, and your studies included a concentration in business. So was going into business always part of your post-basketball plan?
I think my post-basketball plan, there's that great line, sometimes you have to put the plane together once you jump off the cliff, right? Simple the plane once you jump off the cliff. And I think for me, my line of thinking was more associated with what was my plan for building my business through the platform of basketball. And I think once I was able to work through all the emotions that I had and some of the addiction issues that I had initially after my accident, and kind of make that transition. I actually worked for a sports agency before I got involved in doing TV. And I think once I found TV, I thought to myself, oh, this could be the platform that basketball was supposed to be, but actually have more visibility in doing this. And I actually fell in love with the craft of media. And then it was about how do I leverage the position I have through the lens of media to allow my tentacles to expand into other parts of business, whether that be venture capitalists, whether that be just investments, or whether that be starting businesses on my own.
So I'm glad that you mentioned the sports agency, because in the beginning, it seems that most of the things you did were directly tied to sports. You were the recruiter for the sports agency, you had your own brand consulting business, and you partnered with the Leverage Agency, which is one of the leading sports and entertainment marketing firms. What were those early years like for you in business?
It was a lot of networking, but it was also I had to learn a lot. You know, I had never seen an RFP before. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what that meant. It was so fascinating for me to see agents. You know, when I consulted for Under Armour for a very long time, I also consulted for 24 Hour Fitness, two different business strategies. But with 24 Hour Fitness, I was over in Asia working on California Fitness, because 24 has bad feng shui, as they say in Asia. So California Fitness, and understanding what that business model was, but then also working with Under Armour and helping Kevin Plank and Chris Do and those guys at that time, you know, literally try to procure athletes, and seeing pitches and recognizing that sometimes athletes didn't think of themselves as businesses. Even though they were getting these multi-million-dollar deals, they were allowing these agencies or these companies to kind of depict what their brand was. So it was a lot of trial and error, but the job and the partnership with Leverage Agency really gave me insight, because I learned how to network and I learned how to activate my network. And then I got into procurement of sponsorships, which is really intriguing. So the way we would make our profit is we would get a 20% fee based upon the longevity of that relationship. So if you were a brand, you came in, you sponsored an event for 2 years of the event stage, we will get 20% of that. And we also help you activate as a brand throughout the event. So understanding the brand side was pivotal for me, because I always understood the athlete side. I didn't understand what the brand actually needed the athlete to do. So as I continued to ascend media-wise, now all of a sudden it created a new dynamic when I work with brands, because I understand what brands need. So I better help the brand activate what their mission is. And it's been such a learning experience. It's been so much fun. And it's been eye-opening, because it's just opened my eyes to so many different parts of business that I never really understood before.
In recent years, it seems like you've branched out a lot more. In 2018, you co-founded a company called Symmetry, which is a management consulting company, but it's all based on technology, on data and analytics, which I think was relatively a new industry for you. So how did that come about?
Well, I've done this before. I've given a lot of cold calls to individuals, and I've been able to bridge a lot of relationships based off of that. And I use sports as a bridge. And that's also, I think, why I wrote my book, to be honest with you, is that it feels like so much in life, we always talk about what differentiates us. We don't talk about what connects us. And I recognize that everybody had gone through some form or fashion of an accident, whether that be small or bigger. Who really compares as a point of connectivity? And I started to understand that, okay, if I can make relationships that way, and if I can do right by people, then that's the way you want to build a business. That's how you build a CRM, right? A database. And essentially, Symmetry was, I met my wife. My wife works in technology. She works now for a company called Yex, which they do a lot of SEO work. And now their work is more relevant than ever, because every company is trying to reposition themselves in the digital space now and brand themselves again, all over again with this pandemic. It was interesting. I had a lot of friends who are executives, and they always talk to me about, I have to hire this CTO, this CIO, and this guy's, the guys are making $2-3 million a year, and I don't really understand the business. And so I met a guy named Patrick McCreesh through a guy named Dan McCreesh, their family, and we built out this model. He was almost a principal over at Booz Allen. And we started kind of repositioning our model and saying, hey, like, how do you look at your data and how do you retool that? But how do you do data as a service? How can we as a service provide to you almost essentially like as a team, the same kind of infrastructure that an individual will provide while you scale, while you find that CTO or that CIO. And it's been going extremely well. We work with Foot Locker. We've worked with a lot of big time brands, work with the government in different facets. And it's something that's more and more pertinent for a lot of businesses right now, considering this is a new challenge with where we are with COVID-19. That was a
Well,
long-winded answer. I can be a little bit more exact next time, but that's it in a
it's
nutshell.
okay. I
Yeah.
mean, the point is that, you know, the learnings that we get from these experiences, they're not always things that you could put into a little capsule. And so for our audience, especially, they want to know the nuts and the bolts of how you got to where you are. So speaking of the pandemic, I want to talk about your restaurant because you're part owner of The Cabin, which is a restaurant here in New York City. And what was being a restaurateur like for you before coronavirus?
Well, uh, you know, two guys that are my family. I've been running the day-to-day business, and Joey Aponte and Dresden Balliot, which is great. And you know, the whole idea of The Cabin just came out from Joey would always go to the Poconos and we would spend so much time, and we really enjoyed our time out there. It was our way of getting away from the city, and we wanted to bring that same feeling back to New York. It was very hectic. It's a very cash-oriented business. The overturn is quick and fast because people are quick to quit, and you have to find the right kind of personnel, right employees that have that same kind of caretaking feeling that they give you when you walk through the door, but still also very cognizant of running the books and things of that sort. So it was hectic. And Joey and Dre did a lot of the heavy work. I would kind of take a 30,000-foot approach and come in from time to time and help them manage the business from up top, from a high perspective. But it was a lot of fun because we were able to scale the business by always recreating the menu, always giving a different look with our report, and changing throughout each course of the season. So when it was fall, we would redecorate the entire cabin to be a fall cabin, give you that feel. When it was winter, make you feel more warm, make you feel more at home, cozy with the fireplace. When it was spring, change the leaves, get you outside, do more things outside. But and we had guys like guys like 50 Cent come through. We had guys like Fat Joe come through. We had a lot of football players come through. We did a lot of events, which is a lot of fun, and using my network to kind of just make it more of this is our family type environment. I wouldn't recommend a restaurant as the initial investment for anybody that's getting into investments. But for us, look, we applied for our PPE loan after this whole thing is going on. We still haven't received it, but it's been a battle. It's been a fight. We've had to furlough a lot of people, and it's been very difficult and challenging to be on the phone and listen to conversations that people's families are affected. And, we're still trying to keep the business afloat because we still haven't reopened here yet.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say, that the business has been closed completely since the end of March. And I think when people think about celebrities or athletes or entertainers in business, they don't think about those things that all small business owners go through. You guys are going through what everyone is going through right now, trying to hold on to your employees, applying for PPP loans and not hearing back. And so, what is this time like in the pandemic as an entrepreneur?
Well, it's a little bit frustrating, and you said it correctly. As a small business owner, I'm not a global business right now, and it brings different meanings to what a small business is. And one of the things about these PPP loans is that it's been a little bit frustrating seeing a lot of these bigger businesses that are generating millions and millions of dollars that are getting these substantial loans without naming names or without giving numeric value for each. It's been a little bit eye-opening. So I think we've had to very much scrape and claw for how we're staying afloat. It has been nice due to some of the different, renter policies that are in place now that we haven't had to pay our rent, which we're very thankful to Governor Cuomo for, Mayor de Blasio. But it's still like, how do you go back to market when the opportunity does come to open? Is a big question that we have. We're a smaller, more intimate restaurant. So if we seat at max 65 people, if you're trying to give a table in between, that brings you down to 30 people. Then what do you do as it relates to your employees? You need half your staff. You can't bring back your full staff. How are you giving insight and transparency into the kitchen that you're abiding by all these different rules or standards or new regulations that are going to come out? So you have to constantly, like an iOS system, readapt, recalibrate. And how do you create that warm, welcoming, comfortable feeling for your consumer? That's going to be a challenge for us. And especially here in New York, when I see other areas in the country, because I've been paying attention to different strategies, it's you know, a lot of people are still going out, but I think here almost essentially being like the ground zero in the United States, there's a different feeling when you're outside in New York. When I go out, I'm wearing a mask. My daughter's wearing a mask. I'm afraid to take my mask off. Some people aren't wearing masks. Some people are coughing. Some people just think they have the flu or allergies. We don't know what they have. Now testing is getting better, but still, it's going to be a series of ebbs and flows.
Yeah, absolutely. But somehow, even in the midst of the pandemic, you have stayed busy business-wise. This month, you made two more announcements about ventures. One of them is with the insurance company Epic, and you're partnering with them on their Epic Select platform, which is all about financial guidance and protection for elite athletes and entertainers. Were you looking specifically to get into the world of finance?
No, I think the evolution of that relationship came as a byproduct of Symmetry. So Epic was actually one of our biggest clients, and our whole CDO as a service really appealed to John Hahn, who is their CEO. And you know, John was like, "I'm going to get you into an insurance." And I'm like, "There's no way you're going to get me into insurance." There's just the stereotypical mindset I have of people who do insurance. I'm like, "All right, I know it's time for me to re-up my insurance policy. Tell me all the new things that I should get so you can make your money. We could be on our way." But honestly, it's something that very much fit to my story, because risk mitigation is something now that I pay attention more than ever as I scale what I'm doing in business and what my investments are and who some of my partners are. So if you're looking at that from a ransomware perspective, you know, we had a player a month ago named Jamal Murray where somebody hacked into his phone and released some pretty sensitive information, private information of him and his girlfriend, and they released it to the public. And this stuff happens all the time where people literally try to hold you ransom for data or your content. So, you know, kind of rethinking, reimagining, you know, what the new age athlete has to go through is stuff that I go through as far as being related to media, commercial assets. You know, we're up trying to get a home in Westport, Connecticut. And all of a sudden, you know, I see this happening to a lot of athletes, entertainers, or just business people in general. You know, flood insurance, you know, we got a quote from Chubb for $16,000 for flood insurance. I was like, for flood insurance? Wait, my homeowners is 25. So I think just understanding that business is something that I don't think a lot of time people take the time to do. So if I can provide a safe resolution, and it's not, look, we don't care what quote you get, right? It's about how you find the broker that gets you the best possible deal for what your needs are. And also, how do we reimagine what risk mitigation looks like? So announcing that, hey, we're going to create partnerships. Now you see so many businesses trying to find different verticals to generate revenue. Now saying to companies, hey, okay, how do we form a subsidiary under Epic? And we give you a majority, or we give you 49%, we get 51%. And how do we build a system that we can put in place that all those premiums that you would have paid for all your commercial assets, all your life insurances, how do we put that back into a subsidiary where you can essentially pay yourself? And then one day, in 5 or 6 years, at the multiple that Epic is held at, we can buy you out. So now think about how you've been able to generate revenue from a model that it's revenue you have never seen before in your entire life. So I think proposing that to people who own businesses or athletes and getting other athletes to partake in this pool scenario, it's just another way to generate revenue in a time where that's what every company is trying to do. How do you increase your bottom line in a time that there's a pandemic going on and companies are losing money left and right?
So the other announcement that you made was a partnership with Barbarian, which is a digital creative agency, and you are going to be their chief lifestyle and entertainment advisor.
Yes, the chief lifestyle and entertainment advisor, yes.
Right, exactly. But the thing that stood out to me in that announcement was the quote that you gave in the press release, which is that building a customer journey is similar to creating a rich fan experience. And so this seems like one of the places where the crossover is greatest between what you've learned from the athlete side and what you can impart to the business.
It is, you know, doing content with Kevin Durant and Rich Kleiman on the Boardroom has been really cool. And it's also changed what I thought my value proposition should be to Disney and to ESPN. You know, the chief lifestyle editor quote, and we joke around with that title, it's great, but it's more so about the alliance that I have with Stephen Moy and taking a new look at how they're activating brands within the space, and how do we kind of recreate that experience? So I worked with Acura, and I would deal with Acura, and working with Steven and Barbarian, all of a sudden it changes the dynamic between Acura and our partner in ESPN, and how we go to market together, and how we create what that digital experience is together, not only for our network and me as quote unquote talent, but also for the consumer, right? How do we make the experience as accessible and as easy as possible for them? Because I don't want you to have to think. I want you just to partake, to be immersive in the experience. So I think it's just kind of creatively opened up my brain to how to activate my partnerships in a different way. And that's the kind of value add that I want to bring towards my employer. Working for Disney has been really cool. I know somebody could say, wow, Jay, you got 19 jobs out here. What are you doing? But there is a team in place that I have, Karen Kinney, where I work with my agents over at ICM, where we package it the right way with my team to scale appropriately. So it's been a crazy 2020, but I want to come out on the other end of it, being able to help people and empower people with that kind of wealth knowledge that we talk about.
Well, I think you might have just given us a little bit of insight into what I was going to ask next. But the other thing that was interesting to me about that announcement was Barbarian CEO said that you're always talking about disruptive thinking. And I wanted you to explain that for our audience.
Yeah, it goes back to the example that I gave you before. I got lucky to do a sit down with Deepak Chopra, and they are launching something called Chopra, which is the scientific data behind health and wellness, mental health. And he said something that was mind-boggling to me. He said, no thought is your own. It's all recycled. And it was interesting hearing him say that. And you end up, a lot of times when you hear people on TV, they're saying things that other people have said, and it might relate to them. But I think that's also something that's been able to be extremely helpful for me from my accident, is that I think empathy is becoming a lost art in our society, and trying to see things through your eyes, not just my own and my experiences, but try to understand you about what your experiences are and why you look at something the way you do. So that relationship with Stephen Moy and Barbarian and having that experience allows me to pay attention to some of the analytics, Symmetry included, of what your habits are and what you pay attention to, what things are meaningful to you in your life. And if I can understand that, all of a sudden the way I think about myself, I can reposition an argument or reposition what I'm saying so it can relate to you. And it's relating to me at the same time. So once again, how do you find that bridge for more connectivity instead of, let me tell you why I'm different? And sometimes an easy thought is disruptive if it's articulated the right way. There's power in that, especially in the time and today where things are just, look, without saying who these people are, a lot of people throw things out there and it's like, want to shock your amygdala. I'd rather shock your amygdala by coming to you with compassion and empathy. And that's my mission.
You mentioned that, people say you have 19 jobs. We've already talked about, industries from technology and finance and sports and entertainment. And I'm sure you get presented with a million opportunities. What is your decision-making process like when you choose what you're going to pursue? How do you evaluate what's a good investment? What's a good business partnership?
First and foremost, I always look at things that they have to be authentic to who I am and to where I feel like I want to grow as a human being. I think what you're seeing now is there's a social responsibility that companies have. You're seeing companies do some pretty amazing things out there, where there's, donating protective equipment, building protective equipment, doing all these different things to help us deal with what we're dealing with right now. And I feel that a lot of entertainers, athletes, you have these personal brands that should be held to the same standards as these conglomerates. So for me, it has to be in the direction I'm moving as a person to complement the growth that I'm continuing to have as a person individually, first and foremost. I think secondly, I have to believe in the leader. When we talked about some of the partnerships, like I believe in Kevin Durant and Rich Kleiman. I believe in Patrick McCreesh because of the experience he brought to the table working with Booz Allen for the amount of time he did. I believe in John Hahn, the amount of companies that he's taken public and working with Epic and Oak Hill Capital which is their partner. I believe in Stephen Moy from what he's been able to do. And Barbarian is a smaller degree of Shell Worldwide, which is one of the largest agencies in the world. I believe in these people for who they are and what they stand for. So I think if we're able to get through that, then I have to really dig down into your business, into your business plan, and look to see, what your vision is and how you plan on scaling the company, where you are, if you're profitable, how you are growing the business, and who you're growing the business with. I think if I can understand that and you can properly articulate that to me, you can make me believe, and all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted. If it fits in, the last test is if it passes my wife's test, because she's the only person that will let me do these things. If my wife's like, I like it, then potentially I can get involved. So there's a layering system that's in place. And I think the biggest challenge for me, as I've done a lot of things in a short period of time, is now I find myself saying no more than ever, because there's only so much time throughout the course of the day. I still want to spend time with my daughter and my family.
You mentioned the boardroom, and I want to come back to that, because all of these businesses that you have been building have all happened while you've maintained a day job as a television personality. And the boardroom, I think, is so important for a lot of reasons. The first is that it is literally the intersection of sports and business. And because it's not just about sports, I think it's also coincidentally pandemic proof, because it's still relevant at a time like now when no sports are being played. But you're not just the host, you're also part of the creative team behind it. And for me, the biggest thing is that it's from 35 Ventures, which is Kevin Durant's company. So it is really representative of the shift that we're seeing away from athletes being just employees or endorsers and toward ownership of their brands and their companies. So tell us all about the boardroom, origin, about your vision for it, and what you guys are doing right now.
Yeah, so we're about to launch a podcast coming up soon, which I think is going to be really interesting and unique. It's going to be the boardroom proper, and then we're also going to have another one called Ball Don't Stop, which is Kevin and I's way of actually just talking hoops 24/7. We don't get a chance to do that as much anymore in the world that we're in now with sports and business. But I would agree with you. I think the boardroom is more relevant than ever. And you're seeing, all these different sports leagues that are trying to reopen. Some of the force majeure clauses that are happening now. You're seeing salary reductions, players taking a 25% salary reduction. You're seeing potentially the NBA, if they can't come back and play this year, how that can open up the opportunity for the collective bargaining agreement, so then to readjust, what their revenues are and how players get compensated. You're seeing leagues like Major League Baseball, which is a sport of the pastime, but has been struggling from a viewership perspective. How much does it behoove them to get back to market as soon as possible to revamp that sport? It's a really intriguing time. And I think even having The Last Dance really serves as a great backdrop for what we're doing, because Michael wasn't able to do that without Magic Johnson blazing the path. Magic Johnson wasn't able to do that with other great players blazing the path. But almost before, this whole stereotype that, well, you can't do all these other things because it takes away from your job. You're not focused on your sport. And I'm sitting here saying, well, wait, my job requires me to do this for 5 hours a day. I sleep for 8 hours. Okay, that's fine. That's 13 hours. Like, I still got 11 hours throughout the course of the day. What else am I doing? Like, why does it? So to see athletes taking ownership of that, and to that knowledge wealth that we talked about, passing that down to the next tier of athletes. And I do believe that inevitably you're going to have a lot of younger players. Imagine if Zion Williamson owned his brand when he was in high school. Imagine how much more powerful. Now, he's going to be extremely powerful now. But if he had surrounded himself with those kind of thought leaders, and now we're at that age where we're talking about the next Imani Bates, who's a National Player of the Year as a sophomore. How do you own your own content? Now you're seeing the NCAA trying to keep up. Oh, name, image, and likeness. And I'm sitting there saying, no, that's applicable towards high school athletes. You have kids on YouTube that are making millions of dollars. So if you're in a sport, and we see companies like Overtime and Mars is Real, it's going to come a time where you need to understand that this is your business. And what's the best thing that's happened from this pandemic to a degree? Like, I'm all about a college education, but I think now what you're going to see is people are going to be a lot more craft centric, right? I majored in sociology. A Oh, did I lose you? Oh, I got you. Sorry.
You're back. It's okay.
I majored in sociology, but how many times do you meet people that their craft is what they majored in college? It doesn't always happen. So now I'm sitting there saying to the next tier of athlete, gotta love when those people just keep calling you back and they just don't ignore. They just don't take it.
You got to put Zoom on Do Not Disturb.
I know. I didn't even think about it because I'm outside and I'm all happy that I'm finally outside. That's on me. I'll learn better for next time. But I was going to say, what better than teaching an athlete, okay, if you want to pay attention to your craft, let's actually start learning the business of your sport. Like, let's actually focus on that and understand, are you going to form an LLC? You're going to form an S Corp, right? Okay, you want to, these brands, every brand wants to skew younger. They want to hit your demo. Like, how do we build the right kind of infrastructure that can help you have these conversations to learn about your business? So then all of a sudden, when you're 21, 22 years old, you have 5 or 6 years of business experience. That's a different way than all of a sudden you making money at 21 and saying, how do I handle this lifestyle? Like, that's a different way of thinking. And that's how I want to help minorities and other people who are involved in athletics to a different degree.
So you mentioned surrounding yourself with thought leaders, and you said something before that I thought was really ingenious, which was that early on you started reaching out to CEOs who had gone to Duke or CEOs who were based in Chicago when you were playing there, just so that you could build your own personal board of advisors, so to speak. Who have been your biggest business mentors, and what have you learned from them?
Wow. I've had a lot. I have a guy named Dan Levinson who took Starbucks public. He did their IPO. He has a company out in the Northern Bay area. Him and I talk all the time. I have a guy named Carl Liebert, who is just an incredible human being. Him and his wife, Amy. Carl ran 24-Hour Fitness, that first consulting job that I had. He then left 24-Hour Fitness, became the CEO of USAA Bank, left to become CEO of AutoNation. Now he's actually taking some time to relax and be with his family for a while. I have some pretty amazing people. A guy who's one of my best friends, a guy named Mark Klaus, who Mark's story is incredible. Mark's wife and his kids are like my family. Mark actually was the CMO of Mondelez and left Mondelez because he wanted to spend more time with his family. He wanted to actually see his kids play football, and he wanted to watch his youngest play football, and started a smaller job as a CEO of a company called Pinnacle, had private equity come in after he watched his kid for a couple of years playing football, sold it for a crazy, exorbitant amount of money. But he wasn't chasing the money. He was chasing his family, which ultimately led to the money. And now he's the CEO of Campbell's Soup, which is, during this time, they're doing incredibly well. And so I have some other people that I'm very close to, but I think those are the people that are most dear to me. And they constantly challenge me. But the beautiful part about that relationship, they just don't challenge me business-wise. They challenge me as a human being, as a father, and as a husband. And that's the ecosystem that I think is important, because you can go out there, you can make a lot of money. But I just don't want to be myopic on making money. That doesn't define success to me. I have a lot of failures that I've had, but I don't call them failures. I turn them to learning opportunities with a growth mindset. And the more I can surround myself with people that help me see those, bumps in the road as growth opportunities, that's how you continue to propel your level of thinking. And that gets you outside of yourself into something bigger than yourself, which is my family. And that's what I equate success to, my family.
So I'm going to end with this. Now that you're in the position of mentor, and you just told us how you see success for yourself, when you're talking to young athletes, or even when you're just talking to youth in our communities, what is the best advice you give them about how to be successful?
You are the sum of the 5 people you keep closest to you. That's important. It goes back to what happened again. We're fighting through it.
We're in a pandemic, you know,
yes,
we're doing what we can.
it's acceptable. But it goes back to, you know, when I was a player, I would hear a lot of guys say this to me. They're like, well, I'm no different from where I came from. So, you know, you had guys that went back to where they were from and they spent time where they were from. And, you know, a lot of times you saw robberies or you saw things like that occur. And I know where I came from. But I feel like it's my job to go back into our communities and to talk about, because I had this identity crisis. I don't know if you felt this way, because you should be intelligent. You should be articulate. You are powerful beyond measure. And you should hold yourself to that standard. And you're not an Uncle Tom. You're not a sellout by being educated. And for a long time, there was so much conflation with me, because in my own community, people told me that I was being white. I was like, no, I'm being educated. I'm educating myself. And so to pass down the influence of how important education is, so I can walk into a room and know that I'm the only Black person in the room, and be like, I'm the only Black person in this room. Okay, I'm gonna bring other minorities in this room with me. And I'm gonna teach them how to be comfortable in a room where they might be the only minority in the room. Because that's the battle that we're in. That's how we need to think about it. And I'm not gonna allow my emotion to deter me from keep walking through that door. And that is the business world. My dad would talk about all the time working for Amex. He'd be like, look, I'm aware about things that other people in this room aren't aware about, but that makes me more powerful. So now when I see companies talk about the importance of diversity, now you need that. Now you need that. So I think continuing to push that narrative and continuing to push the story of how you can empower yourself with surrounding yourself with the people that don't want to settle for mediocrity, that want to settle for a standard of excellence. That's the narrative. That's the standard that I want to create. And I want to make sure that the people that I'm surrounding myself with continue to push me too, because there's still a lot of things I need to learn. I'm not on Snapchat all the time. I'm not on TikTok all the time. And I want somebody to sit there and say, hey, you need to do this, or hey, this brand needs to do that. But I don't have that experience unless you're thinking that way, unless you're aware, thinking through that lens. And your cultural experience, even if you do come from an urban area, that's where all these companies want to penetrate. So what better litmus test or focus group that you can provide for them than being aware of what you're paying attention, what you're buying, you know, what you see your friends buying. Build that out. Think that way. Don't just let that small circle of your environment say, this is as far as I can go. You can go as far as your brain tells you want to go. But you have to tell yourself first and foremost that you want to go there. And if you can do that, that's half the battle.
That is the excellence that we're all about at Black Enterprise too. I have enjoyed this conversation, Jay. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. And we're looking forward to, you know, your next 25 jobs and the big things that come from you.
I'm scaling down. I'm scaling down. So yes, thank you too. I really appreciate it. And always been a fan. I'm glad I could actually participate in this one.